Melo, you're on mute. Melo, you're on mute.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's the internet all over again. Welcome to our coffee chat. And this afternoon, it's a pleasure to have with us the president of the Pharmaceutical and Healthcare Association of the Philippines, si Dr. Beaver T. I'd like to ask him several questions about the vaccine and how it would be coming from the private sector. Magandang araw po, Dr. Beaver T.
Afternoon, Melo. Glad to be
It's a
here.
pleasure to have you with us. Can you tell us how is PHAP today, especially with the news that the government has entered or about to sign agreements with different companies to provide us with vaccines? What's the latest from your end?
Well, of course, we're very happy that the vaccines will soon be made available for the country, right? Yan naman talagang way out of this pandemic that we can protect our citizens para hindi magkasakit. And the way to do it is really through vaccines on top of the normal health protocols that we've already been doing. So syempre, we're all very excited that nangyayari na po ito, na hindi na tayo nahuhuli masyado.
Humahabol, kumbaga, no? Pero ano po, mula sa private sector,
Right.
what have you learned? Ano po yung nabalita ninyo? Meron na po bang mga kasunduan na nalagdaan ng Pilipinas sa iba't ibang kumpanya na posibleng miyembro ng PHAP?
Well, I mean, there are, of course, the initiatives that the government has reached out to several member companies, particularly yung sa Pfizer, yung sa AstraZeneca. Nababalitaan din namin that meron silang arrangements now being worked through for Covavax, which is being developed in the US by this company called Novavax, potentially locally being represented by United Laboratories. So then there's also the initiative that Ambassador Waldes to the United States was able to initiate, particularly with Moderna, and now talking to the private sector and the government also to be able to secure doses of Moderna vaccine also for the Philippines. So all of these efforts, kita niyo naman na both the private sector and the public sector kumikilos para magkaroon ng supply for the country. Remember, we are a country of 108 million, and we have approximately 700 million, 100 million, so we have 70 million adults that we need to protect. So we need as many doses as possible from the different accredited or proven suppliers na proven talaga na efficacious yung bakuna nila. So the more, I think, the better. I think that's a really good story that's behind this. And syempre, this great news that we just saw the other day from the US, where the FDA, the US FDA, has granted emergency use approval for a single-dose vaccine coming from Johnson & Johnson, locally represented by Janssen. So potentially, that's another potential vaccine that could be given, and only one dose pa. Maganda ng protection level. So these are all of the very exciting developments that are happening right now.
Are you optimistic that we will be able to catch up with the international community as far as inoculation?
Well, I think the important thing is we focus anong mga dapat mangyari dito sa atin to be able to protect our citizens, right? It's very telling. See, when the new president of the US came in, one of the first he said was, "I want 1 million doses every day. I want 1 million vaccinations happening every day." So kumbaga nagbigay siya ng target, right? Dito sa atin, I'd love to hear what would be the target potentially so that we can roll out quickly at meron tayong hinahabol, right? Para may timeline tayo, how quickly we will be pushing hard na talaga we have doses available, we have the necessary personnel, we have mga sign-up list gawa na kagad para mabilis talaga yung kilos. Because the faster we can vaccinate the population, the better we can protect ourselves against variations or the mutants or the mutations. Yung virus, when it replicates, pag nakapasok sa katawan at it can multiply itself, that's when nakakaroon ng mutation. Not just what you get from the current ones that are circulating, but sa loob ng tao, you can generate new mutations. So the more we can vaccinate, the faster we can protect the population, the better we can reduce the chances of mutations happening. Kaya importante talaga mabilis ang rollout ng vaccination programs.
Opo, what are your thoughts about the EUA, yung emergency utilization? Ano po ang inyong tingin dito?
This is, of course, a facility para mas mabilis ang proseso that we can actually use potentially well-proven vaccine or treatment among people who need it the most. Uh, it facilitates decision making. It allows use of a product or a vaccine much earlier than would be the normal process. If the normal process takes 10 to 15 years or even up to 20 years, I mean, like this is remarkable. Now, at the end of what, 14 months, we have a minimum of 3 approved vaccines. Wow, that's a wow. Because in the
Mhm.
past, the best that was ever done was 5 years. Pinakamaganda na 5 years. That was for Ebola. And that was obviously another crisis. Buti hindi umabot sa atin, tumutik na umabot sa atin yung virus dito sa atin. It almost arrived in the Philippines, right? Nung
Mhm.
panahon pa ni Secretary Green, we had a potential issue with Ebola. So it's important that the world be ready to protect itself as quickly as possible. So yes, emergency use authorization is a very good tool. But at the same time, what that means is tuloy-tuloy pa rin ang monitoring at tuloy-tuloy pa rin ang bantay to make sure that nothing untoward na unexpected events happen with the use of the vaccine. And
Ah, okay.
to date, ang nakikita natin in the monitoring is that when it comes to severe COVID-19, yung talagang na hospital, kulang sa oxygen, potentially nalagay sa ventilator, 100% protection so far against that type of a scenario. Eh, yan yung nakakamatay, di ba? When you get
Mhm.
COVID, when you get the infection, it's not the mild symptoms na nawalan ng amoy, sense of smell, or sense of taste. Hindi yan yung critical. The critical is yung na-admit yung pasyente at potentially there's a chance na he could go into severe complications, potentially mamatay. So far, all of the vaccines are able to protect against that complication at 100%. That's fantastic results. These are
Aha.
fantastic results that we're seeing to date.
Okay. Did I get it right that under the EUA, hindi ka pwedeng bumili sa pharmacy sapagkat it's only the government who will provide the vaccine.
Correct.
Am I right? Yeah.
Yes, that's absolutely right. It is the duty of the government. Duty ito ng gobyerno natin to protect its citizens. So the government must be ready and willing to buy the vaccines and provide it to the whole citizenry for free. That's
Okay.
really that's the role of gobyerno. Saan pa ba pupunta ang buwis natin? Right? Kung hindi pa tayo tulungan ng protektahan ng gobyerno natin, right? Laki-laki ng
Uh-huh.
nakakaltas sa sweldo natin, buwan-buwan. So that's where we want to be, right? That's the minimum protection that we should be getting or minimum benefit we should be getting from our government. And true enough, itong mga dumarating, at least this initial donation and the subsequent programs should be given for free to the priority segments, and then after that, the next segment, etc., para tuloy-tuloy maprotekta tayo. Now,
Yeah.
syempre,
Eh,
always an issue of government budget, right? So doon tumutulong yung private sector. The private sector has been donating, has also been saying, okay, gobyerno, kayo bahala dito sa mga laylayan, kami bahala muna sa empleyado namin. So kumbaga, we've
ah,
relieved some of the private sector is helping relieve the burden of the government, pero syempre gumastos rin ng privado sector. Now, hindi namin mabebenta yun because under the
mhm.
EUA, hindi namin mabebenta. So tuloy, lumalabas, magiging libre for the employees of
Okay.
the companies. So,
Hindi hindi gagawin
sagutan
salary
namin,
deduction.
hindi, walang salary deduction yan. So parang lumalabas nun, beneficial na lang ng empleyado.
Okay. All right. Maganda po yung binabanggit ninyo sapagkat unang-una, maraming nagdududa, nalulungkot at nag-aagam-agam na baka hindi sila abutin ng bakuna. So dito, it's the government playing the role na talagang aalagaan ang mamamayan. Ngayon po, ang
Tama,
tanong
tama,
ko, at yun ay inaasahan at yun ang kanilang sinumpaang obligasyon. Okay?
tama, tama.
Maliwalag tayo dyan. Ngayon po, gaano ba katagal talaga gumawa ng bakuna? I may have asked you this, but definitely our viewers will like to find out how long does it take for one to do a vaccine? And why can't we not do it in the Philippines?
Sa totoo lang, we can do it. I mean, like, we have the know-how. Yung talino nandito. Ang problema, walang suporta, we don't have the high-tech laboratories to be able to do it. Kasi syempre, you need to be very, very safe na walang potential contamination, etc. In the normal business, all right, yung pangkaraniwan, all of us are competing, right? Lahat kami magkaka-rival. Sasabihin ko, oh, hahabulin ko itong particular sakit na to. So, syempre, aaralin ko yan. This particular virus. Say it's a virus that causes warts. All right?
Uh-huh.
I want to have a vaccine against warts. So, syempre, ako lang nag-aaral nun. Maybe may karibal ako. Maybe one or two companies competing against that, towards that particular disease. Very different ang nangyari dito. In COVID-19, when the Chinese published the genome or the structure of the virus early January 2020, lumabas in scientific journals, ito yung itsura ng virus, ito yung itsura ng kalaban natin. Aba, hindi lang isa, dalawa, tatlong kumpanya tumingin. It's like over 100 companies looked at that virus structure and decided, yes, I can make a vaccine against this. So instead of one or two competing to make a vaccine, you had over hundreds of people bringing all their talino, their resources to try to figure out how to create the right vaccine to block this particular virus. And so tuloy-tuloy, ang bilis ng development. Because everybody was trying to develop that vaccine, they were sharing information, and then people started, yung iba, they already had a head start kasi marunong na talaga sila gumawa ng bakuna. So they were already starting phase 1, phase 2 trials very early on. And then, of course, they did not compromise safety because all of the studies, lahat ng pag-aaral na ginawa, meron data safety monitoring board, meron mga ethics approvals. So every time nagkaroon ng major side effect, tinitigil muna nila yung study, okay, aralin natin, saan galing yan? Is this related to the vaccine or related to something else? So talagang very careful pa rin ang progress, pero sabay-sabay nangyari. Imbis na in sequence, one after another, naging sabay-sabay ang development. So that's how we actually activated, that's the hidden story about how quickly nagkaroon ng mga bakuna versus this particular pandemic.
Okay, may tanong tayo mula kay Ronnie Lorejo and he's from Legazpi City. Would you recommend to our government to procure Johnson and Johnson vaccine? You said J&J dose doesn't need follow-up shots. Ano po ang inyong tingin? Objectively.
Dapat. I mean, like, in truth, if there was, the ideal vaccine is a single dose vaccine. Ideal vaccine should be single dose at a certain level of efficacy of about 70-80%. Para that way, protect ang bilis ng logistics, right? You can now just quickly go to one community, sweep through them, vaccinate everybody, then go on to the next and not have to come back for a second time or a second round 3 or 4 weeks later. Yan ang ideal. In the ideal world, dapat single dose. So yes, if the government can get access to the Johnson and Johnson vaccine, by all means, we should do it.
Aha, okay. But what about vaccines that will need super cold refrigerators or freezers?
Well, at the start, yan lang kasi available, right? That was at the very start, yan lang ang data that was available and the only vaccines available. But I think as we are moving forward, we're gaining more experience on how these vaccines work and how the manufacturers now tweak or fix their vaccine, the stability, where they're starting to see that they don't really need the super freeze anymore. So I think the data constantly evolves as more information comes through and as they test with real world conditions how well the vaccine does in our environment. Mukhang tumatagal na. You need less and less of the super freezer type of facility. And hopefully we all get just to the refrigerator type na pwede na. And I think
Uh,
many of the vaccine manufacturers are really moving towards vaccine manufacturing.
mhm. But definitely, it costs a lot of money to produce a vaccine, right?
Tama. Can easily be about to $2 billion. Billion.
Dollars. And you're not even sure kung magtatagumpay ka sa research, right?
Absolutely. So what companies were doing, they were placing huge bets. Nagpupusta sila. At the same time that when they were developing their vaccine, makita lang nila na phase 2 mukhang positive na to or phase 1 pa phase 2 gumaganda, there's a strong likelihood of an immune response. Nag-invest na sa manufacturing. Because
Uh-huh.
the big expense is really manufacturing. It takes months, if not years, to set up a factory to properly produce a vaccine. So people were not waiting for final approval na aprobado na itong bakuna. They were doing it at a risk, calculated risk na effective tong vaccine natin, but they were already investing in manufacturing. They were already making partnership agreements with other manufacturers so that you can expand instead of one factory lang, you can have 3 or 4 factories making the vaccine.
Okay. You know, I am as interested as everyone else because for a country like Chile to have enough vaccines to inoculate people kung magtutuloy-tuloy yung schedule nila, buong populasyon by June 30 tapos sila. Sapagkat
Nakaingit, ano?
nakakaingit eh. Yung kanilang sikreto daw was political will because the president was a businessman before at marunong makipag-negotiate sa mga drug companies. Kahit wala pa raw approval ng FDA nila o ng international community, nakipagkasundo na. Meron ng agreements. Kaya nung ma-approve, meron ka agad. I don't know. Can
Well,
it also be possible in that country like the Philippines?
obviously there were several pathways at the time moving forward, right? There was the pathway of direct negotiation with the leading companies at the time, and you could actually have conditionalities for that agreement to be take effect. Siyempre, first agreement dapat pasado sa phase 3. May phase 3 trials na talagang efficacious. Pangalawang conditionality, maybe you should obtain emergency use authorization from either the WHO or the US FDA or whoever, right? So you could have put in these types of conditionalities before mag-money down ka. Had there been these conditions, so that would have been part and parcel of your negotiation process. Yung United Nations, they had put together naman yung COVAX. COVAX facility was like pooled procurement, saying, look, we can provide up to 20% of your population needs. So potentially sa Pilipinas, 20% of 70 million, 3.5 million doses.
14. 14
14
million.
million, 14 million doses, right? So I can provide through COVAX, yan yung magiging at this certain target price. But for the vaccine to be there, approved in the COVAX, syempre meron din siyang phase 3, meron din siyang emergency use approval. They have all sorts of conditionalities before mag-money down. So,
Uh-huh.
I don't know what happened. Obviously, wala naman tayo sa kapangyarihan. We were just watching from the sidelines kung ano nangyayari. But yeah, I mean, like if Chile was able to do that, that's fantastic.
Yeah. I was talking with Dr. Ted Elbosa, a former USEC at DOH and now EVP of UP System. And he said it's our procurement law that prevented us from having a money down approach to drug companies. Because kung hindi pa approved, ng mga agencies like FDA, hindi ka pwedeng bumili nung hindi mo pa nakikita. Parang siguro pwede comparable sa Bitcoin, yung cryptocurrency. Parang ganun.
I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not an expert in the procurement law. But I think there have been esteemed justices, retired justices, who actually gave very different opinions. So, who am I to argue? Right? I think uh, I think we should obviously we should look to the legal luminaries to figure that out.
Yeah. Oo. Pero katulad po niyan, kung meron kang bakuna na sinasabi na effective sa age range na 19 to 59, paano na yung mga katulad namin na labas
Kasama
na
ko
doon
diyan.
sa 59? Classmates na pala tayo. We belong to the discount club. Okay? So what will happen to us?
We'll have to wait. We'll have to
We'll have
wait
to
for
wait.
the next. We'll have to wait for the arrival of a vaccine with EUA that fits our profile.
Uh-huh.
Because
Okay.
obviously the our Philippine FDA has access or had access to a ton of data that we did not get to see. They saw from the trials of the company, mukhang hindi sila nag-include ng mga pasyente o tao 60 years old up. When you design clinical studies or trials like this, you really set the criteria kung ano yung klaseng pasyente ang gusto nyo ma-enroll. And that's something that the US FDA gave very strong guidance to Pfizer and Moderna when they were developing the vaccines in the US. Very clear sinabi ng US FDA, and this is published, this is well documented in the literature. The US FDA told Pfizer and told Moderna, hey, kulang ka sa ganitong klaseng pasyente. Kulang kayo sa itim, or kulang kayo sa pedya, sa younger age group, or kulang kayo
Uh-huh.
sa matanda. So you have to add more patients. They were told to add these types of patients. So did the sponsoring company Sinovac have that kind of guidance? Did they not change or modify their inclusion criteria to expand the number of the types of patients who would be included? Now, that's between, I guess, their regulatory agency in China, the China FDA, and them. But nung bumagsak ang datos dito sa atin, yan ang nakita ng FDA natin. It looks like that's what they saw. Walang pasyente above 59 years old na sinama sa datos that was
Pagsusuri.
submitted. Oo. So
Ah,
tuloy,
okay.
how can I recommend? Wala kayong ebidensya. Wala kang pinapakita sa akin. Ano gusto mong sabihin ko? Bahala na si Batman na, sige, pwede na yun. Parang mahirap, di ba? You don't want that from our regulatory agency. You want our regulatory agency to make a decision based on the factual evidence in front of them.
Mhm. Okay. Yung bang indemnification, how
Mhm.
has it hindered the delivery of vaccines to the Philippines? Would you have anything to say about it?
Sa totoo lang, the indemnification was being talked about as early as October last year. Nandun
Uh-huh.
na yan sa COVAX. Even the COVAX facility of the United Nations had it in there. Nandun na yan sa mga criteria, conditionalities that needed to that the state, the government had to provide.
Uh-huh.
They stated that right out there. So whoever was looking at COVAX, parang na-miss ang checklist ata. Wala yan sa checklist niya eh.
Para nga, no? So, yung pala yun. Okay. Dahil lang sa amin, nagsasabi kasi na kaya ika na-delay dahil yung indemnification law hindi pa na ipapasa.
Well,
Pero as to why it got delayed, we cannot tell, right?
it was there from the get-go. I mean, like, the United Nations has been very transparent about the requirements for COVAX facility. And now put yourself in the shoes of the manufacturer. Ako, gumagawa ko ng bakuna that would potentially help humanity.
Okay.
Tapos, ha? kakasuhan niyo ako because somebody had that side effect? Parang, really? Ako pa mananagot niya?
Uh-huh.
Diba?
Okay.
Think about it. I mean, like, who in his right mind would want to now put themselves at risk?
Okay. Okay. Unless there's something wrong with one's setup ng pag-iisip, no?
Right. Or unless may high confidence that no way na ako madidemanda for whatever reason, right? But I mean,
Okay.
like, let's unfortunately, the Philippines has had a very our recent past has not been exactly very conducive or
Uh-huh.
not been very welcoming.
Favorable?
Yeah,
Favorable could be a good
It-
term.
yeah. The environment has just been something that gives us pause and makes us really take be extra careful in the steps that we move forward in, right?
Yeah.
We need to protect ourselves also.
Okay. Paano kaya ito, Dr. Beaver, yung mga areas na sabihin natin may kalayuan sa Metro Manila,
Like
who
mga
may
laylayan,
or
no?
which may not have facilities for super cold temperatures to keep the vaccines. Tapos, isang tinanong ko kanina sa Malacanang press briefing ay kung may bakuna tayo, may sapat ba tayong hiringgilya at karayom? Dahilan
Of
sa
course.
that's another issue.
Mm.
So, what are your thoughts about this, Dr. Beaver?
Well, clearly, which is why the government has to procure different types of vaccines from different manufacturers, potentially to find the right vaccine na pwede pang refrigerator, na pwede ma-transport through our different islands, through the mountains, etc. And so in truth, yung national immunization program natin, may capability tayo to reach itong mga laylayan. Itong mga sinasabi ng GIDA na napakalayo, isolated, economically depressed areas, kaya natin with the regular vaccine. So that means refrigerated. So if the Philippines can buy refrigerated vaccines and not just the super freezer cold conditions na nire-require, of course, pwede yan makarating doon sana sa mga lugar na yan. We have the capabilities to do that. Kaya natin yan, right? At
Uh-huh.
kaya yan ng gobyerno natin.
Yung karayom at yung hiringgilya kaya.
They should be buying that now, right? The government should be procuring that. And I certainly hope hindi mangyayari uli yung nangyayari sa mga swab natin na walang swab. Can you imagine may testing ability pero wala namang pang swab to collect the
Specimens.
specimen. So sana naman we actually have good logistics people now working that para ma-procure nila kagad yung mga hiringgilya, etc.
Okay. Okay. So one thing is sure, it is the government's responsibility to attend to all this. Coming from
Absolutely.
the private sector, what could be your contributions? Because my friends from the Federation of Filipino Chinese Chambers of Commerce already entered into an agreement with Sinovac and AstraZeneca. Sabi nila, basta mayroong mga ngailangan para makatulong din doon sa mga kawani ng kanilang mga miyembro. Ano nakikita niyong papel ng private sector dito?
Well, the private sector has been engaging with AstraZeneca and the IATF to also procure vaccines and then 50% donation to the government. So nangyayari na yan. That's one. All right. Second is really like I said earlier. Now the private sector has also been reaching out, has been approached by Ambassador Romualdez and working with Moderna, and now the Razon Group is actually pulling together procurement by the private sector to get naman the Moderna vaccine. So this one naman to relieve the burden of the government from having to uh, allocate vaccines potentially to the employees and or family members of the employees within these companies. So definitely the private sector is stepping up. They're buying vaccines on their own with the blessing of the IATF and the other kinaukulang government officials. At the same time, taking care of their employees. So that's already a major role that the private sector is playing. When traditionally no other country in the world is doing this, right? Lahat yan gobyerno.
Uh-huh.
Lahat gobyerno. I think there may be one other country here in Southeast Asia that is potentially also going down that route na tumutulong din ng pribadong sektor. I'm not sure if it's Indonesia or one of these other South our neighbors. Na they're also talking to the private sector to also try to contribute in this manner. Pero
Uh,
definitely nauna na tayo doon, right? With all of these initiatives na nasimulan na even months ago.
uh, Doc, ilang mga kumpanya ang gumagawa ngayon ng bakuna? Would you have any idea?
Well, the ones who tried or working on coronavirus vaccine, lumampas 100. At one point, it was like 129 companies. Now, there have been failures already along the way. So, importante nga that marami nga nag-effort to try to develop a vaccine because there will be failures. Uh, at least two companies, three or four companies have pulled out of making vaccines because their candidate wasn't good enough. All right.
Mhm.
Now, traditionally in the in kung ordinary days, regular business of no walang pandemic, there were like four, five major big pharma companies that had uh, um, huge productions. But that doesn't count the ones that were in India. That doesn't count the ones that were in Korea, because these two countries also make a lot of pretty good vaccines.
Mhm.
In fact, the Philippine government buys quite a lot of measles vaccines from the Serum Institute of India, which is
Of
a
India.
very well known company in terms of quality and reputability of the quality of their vaccines. It also has even the WHO certification, I believe, that talaga may imprimatur ng WHO na yeah, okay sila gumawa ng bakuna. And
Uh-huh.
very low cost,
Yeah.
matter of fact.
Eh kung kasi naitanong, kung meron kang investment na isa hanggang 2 bilyong dolyar, pagkatapos ang kakumpetensya mo yung mga 100 kumpanya, hindi kaya magbagsak presyo yan at hindi makabalik yung investments nila?
Again, this is an effort to help humanity rather than for profit. I think
Hmm.
that's the mindset
So
of
that's
all
the
these
difference.
companies. Oh, at this point in time, if we cannot control this pandemic, walang negosyo, period. There will be
Mhm.
no business if we cannot control this pandemic. So we first must protect ourselves, and by protecting ourselves, we must protect everybody. Because if we're all in this together. Kung hindi protektado lahat, walang negosyo. So we need
Uh-huh.
to do this to protect the world. Once everybody's protected, then potentially we can do regular business na. Who knows?
Uh-huh.
Who knows? After this pandemic is finally declared over, kasi the WHO was the one who declared the pandemic, oras na na-declare na over ng tapos na yung pandemic, aba, syempre, at this point, that point, it now becomes potentially more of a free market. So now,
Uh-huh.
potentially, a government can choose, who knows, we might end up in a scenario where it could be an annual thing. We don't know. We don't know anything about yet the long-term immunity because it is just a one-year-old virus, right?
Yeah.
In the as time goes on, baka malaman natin that, hey, you actually need a repeat shot every 3 years. Malay na, sabihin natin, I'm just picking out a number, right? And this,
Yeah.
no factual basis. Sabihin
Yeah.
natin that maybe we have to get revaccinated every 3 years. So tuloy, the governments may now want to procure every 3 years. So now they will choose now from all of these other
Mhm.
potential candidates. So at that point, it becomes regular business na. It's no longer a
Okay.
pandemic situation where talagang kailangan mass talaga. We push hard to vaccinate as many people as possible as quickly as possible. Maybe
Okay.
later on, it
Yung
becomes like a flu vaccine.
of course. Pero let me ask you, you're also in touch with your colleagues sa iba't ibang bansa. How are they doing? Would you have any idea how they're doing, how they respond to crisis like this?
Well, I mean, like a lot of our colleagues, a lot of my colleagues are also in our similar situation where every so often na lockdown or there may marami mga work from home situations pa rin. You get control of the virus, then suddenly may resurgence. So talagang it's a cycle of ups and downs. Eh. I mean, like what 1 week okay na okay lahat, then the next week suddenly magkaroon ng one or two cases, lockdown na naman lahat. So it's very it jars the system. Parang talaga, parang nothing's normal. It's very hard
Yeah.
to plan. It's very hard to
Uh-huh.
plan for the future.
Okay. Pero we can only wish we will be in a much better situation in the near future. But definitely the vaccine is not the be all and end all, right?
It's not the
Hindi
be all
ito.
and all, yes. But it certainly helps, right? I mean,
Yeah.
like if you look at data coming out of Israel, Israel has managed to vaccinate at least 40% of their population. And already they're seeing a dramatic drop in hospitalizations, a dramatic drop in mortality. So, wow, it would be fantastic if they get to 80-90% of the population being totally vaccinated, fully vaccinated. We might see a
Uh-huh.
country, I mean, like we should watch what's happening in Israel. They might suddenly open up suddenly na pwede na lahat or wala na mask or anything like that, back to normal. They could be a
Uh-huh.
model for what the future is.
Really. What about logistics? What about funding? What about governance?
Well, syempre, during at this current date and age, right? Obviously, our government needs to find the money to find all the money they need to buy enough vaccines. At this point in time, the prices of the vaccines, they're probably the cheapest they're gonna be. They're probably going to be the cheapest ever. I mean, like AstraZeneca, no, not for profit pricing from what they've been announcing in the press, right? $4 or $5 just to cover the expenses that they have. I'm pretty sure that's very similar to what are the other manufacturers are charging at this point in time. Uh, you have to take a look at what they've been actually releasing in the press. In terms of logistics, yeah, I mean, like we do have companies that can actually roll out this or deliver the vaccine from point to point. The issue next would be, do we have enough people who or healthcare providers who will now be vaccinating? Because if you're going to do a mass vaccination, magandang may proseso, right? You need to have the proper setup, physical distancing, the timing, having sure that you have ready emergency response team during the actual mass vaccination day, resting areas for the patients after makatanggap ng bakuna before finally sending them home. So
Mhm.
there is an expense in terms of the proper setup, the number of nurses and doctors that you will be needing to be able to actually administer, and then of course having the necessary emergency facilities just in case.
Okay. Just in case. I'd like to acknowledge si Del Rey Ariazo, si Jessica Marceliana is watching. Si Melly C. Lim is also watching us, and the rest of our friends on Facebook Live. I'd like to thank them for being with us. Doc, any message sa ating mga manonood, sa ating mga tagapakinig, sa mga makakapanood ng ating panayam ngayong araw na ito sa ating coffee chat?
Well, maraming salamat sa ano no sa invitation to speak today. And yes, it's very exciting times, especially now that the vaccines are finally starting to arrive sa ating bansa. Now, vaccines work. I think nakikita na natin throughout the rest of the world na patunayan na talaga that the vaccines are actually reducing death by reducing hospitalization from severe illness. The ones that have regularly published their data, nandun na sa lahat, nakalatag lahat ng datos, kitang-kita they actually work. So by all means, kung walang contraindication sa inyo, have yourself vaccinated. Tanggapin po natin yung bakuna because nakakatulong talaga yan at may babalik natin ng Pilipinas back to January 2020. At least yung kabuhayan natin, the life of the party, at least nakakatrabaho lahat, we can entertainment was available and we can boost up again our economy. So as
Yep.
soon as we can get the vaccine, by all means, particularly those vaccines that have published data that actually prove that they can reduce severe COVID-19 disease.
Yeah. Meantime, seniors like us will have to wait.
Unfortunately, yes. That's the unfortunate thing.
Pero pahabol ko to. Bakit sa ibang bansa binabakunahan yung mga 90 anyos?
To be honest, I don't know what they decided, ano yung proseso nila. Pero dito, ang proseso natin is very clear. May vaccines efficacy panel that they first do the initial evaluation. There's the FDA, which looks at all of this data, working siguro with the vaccine expert panel, and then looking at the evidence. The evidence must have been very clear in the minds of our FDA na kulang ang datos.
Uh-huh. Okay, so that explains. Thank you, Dr. Beaver. It's a pleasure na makasama kayo sa Coffee Chat.
My
Magandang
pleasure.
hapon po. Maraming
My pleasure,
salamat si
Mel.
Dr. Beaver Temesis, Pangulo ng Pharmaceutical and Healthcare Association of the Philippines, over Coffee Chat. Thank you. Have a nice day. God bless us all. Till next time. Thank you. Salamat po.